Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. What's up, everyone? My name is Will, and welcome to my Personal Development Podcast. In this episode, we will be talking about what books should you read at the age of your early 20s, 21, 22, 23, that have the best chance of changing your whole life. Now, this is a common topic that a lot of young people have that are into personal development and business. And I think I can answer it very well because I have read around 200 books in the last 2 years, and I really know this world really well. I know what books are popular, and I know what books are not well known that should be known. And everything or most things that you can name, I know. Now, if you're not that young, I really do think that you should still read these books if you haven't. And as someone who knows a lot about this world, it's something that it's kind of a broad question, somewhat vague as well. It's kind of like asking a musician, what's your favorite song? Because I can answer that better if it's more specific. If you can say something like, I would love to make more money in my life, or I would love to start a coffee business and I need advice on startups. You can get a lot more specific because there's just so many different answers to this question, and I can give you a better answer with more specifics. But this is generally how most people will ask this question, and therefore I want to tackle it in this way because most people don't know how to be specific. And there's all sorts of different books I can tell you depending on where you want to be headed. If you want to be more optimistic, more confident, etc., etc. And one of the first things I have to talk about is the whole fact that so many people they know about, if they get into the self-development or business market, they know about the most standard books, the well-marketed books, the 4-Hour Workweek books, because those are just the books that are on all the bookstore shelves. That's always talked about by everyone else. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyone who gets into this field, that's the first book they talk about, blog about, and it kind of just spreads the word even more. And I'm not saying it's not a completely bad thing. Some of these people were unknown authors a few years ago, so it's a huge accomplishment that they've done this. Tim Ferriss was one of those people, but at the same time, you end up with this area of incredibly useful books that most people don't know about, and there's a ton of books by billionaires that fall into this category. And if you just Google books by billionaires, my list will be somewhere near the top of that results. And it's around 55 books right now. And some of those books are just incredible. And the reason why my list is just so much longer than anyone else's on Google is because I'm really, really plugged into this sphere. And I just know it really well. And each time a new book by a billionaire comes out, like it did this year with Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, and Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. That book was just incredible. I mean, talk about a successful business. I know about it, and I put it on my list. But let me just answer this question. So, how would you tackle this? Well, it really depends on where you want to head in life. I mean, if I could really get a gauge on who you are as a person, I can answer that better. For example, how knowledgeable are you about personal finance? For 99% of 21-year-olds, they know nothing about it. And therefore, it's probably the most important thing because it's the one thing that's not taught in school. And yet, managing your money and really having the right mindsets and beliefs about it, and really uncovering those childhood beliefs about scarcity and really understanding how to make more money and having those essential principles, that is crucial. So the first book I have to recommend is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which really does an incredible job about money. Now, I'm going to throw a bunch of books at you, but I'll let you mix and match because Again, it depends on what you want. Of course, if you want to go overboard, you can read them all. But again, it's not always about quantity. You don't want to like skim through these books and not really take anything from them. So take your time with them. So on top of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you really want even more mindsets, but more so if you want to get shocked and really surprise yourself, because there's a lot of beliefs about making money that most people think are true, stereotypes about millionaires that aren't true, then read the book Millionaire Next Door, or listen to the audiobook version, because that's a pretty long book. The Millionaire Next Door. It's a great book, and it really uncovers a lot of assumptions that aren't true through a lot of analysis of thousands of millionaires, and one of them is that they live these glamorous lives. In fact, it turns out that most of them live very modest lives, and it's that saving that allowed them to succeed. And there's just some really interesting points in there, such as the average car owned by a millionaire, the most common, is not a Ferrari or Lamborghini, it is a pickup truck. And it really turns out that 1% of millionaires who are really flashy with their money, they give the rest of millionaires a bad name. So next, what else can you read? I just want to throw in one last book on money mindsets. And by there, you'll have a solid foundation. That one's Richest Man in Babylon. The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, this one's kind of different. It's told in a different way. It's told in like a parable and Old English. But if you can, look past that, you can get some good points. It's a bit dry, but it's still really good. Timeless principles in there. Of course, if you want to read more books on money mindsets, there's plenty, like T. Harv Eker's Millionaire Mind. But by then, I would say you have the fundamentals down, and of course, the fundamentals can be drilled and drilled. So, of course, I still love reading a lot of books by millionaires just to cement that in there. But that should give you a good framework. Now, let's move on to some other topics. What else could you be interested in? Well, other than wealth, there's actual mathematics behind saving your money. Now, those books give you sort of broad mindsets, but as far as like actual specifics and directions on how to invest your money, how to get a raise, I recommend Ramit Sethi's books. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It has a cheesy name, but it's really good in terms of explaining that. Or this book called The Millionaire Teacher. Again, cheesy name, but it really walks you through some good math. And if you really want to go deep, the book I recommend is Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. So that's it. That's your pretty much beginner fundamentals. And if you can really go through those books and understand them, you'll be so ahead of 99% of people our age. Now, let's move on from beginner money-related books. So what if you want to really just change your life in other ways beyond just money? And that's really important because people make a lot of money and then they still feel unhappy or regret a lot of life. So that's why I recommend the book Top 5 Regrets of the Dying for that specific reason. If you can really discover what makes successful people still regret life, or just average people, you can eliminate those regrets. And the book is basically about this nurse who saw over 200 people die. She saw them die on their deathbed because she was a nurse. She took care of elderly people, and they would oftentimes confess their biggest regrets on their deathbed. And that book is something I come back to time and time again to really adjust my thinking. One of the biggest regrets in there was, I wish I lived a life that was true to me instead of a life that other people wanted me to live. Again, we all have pressures, whether it's our parents' expectations or whatever else, in terms of the jobs that we pursue, the interests we pursue, and it's tough breaking free from them even when we have that. So that's crucial. Now, another book that I think is worth a lifetime of value is a book on habits. It's called The Power of Habit. And it's not one of those wishy-washy books. It actually dives into the science and psychology and biology of habit. And as the billionaire Warren Buffett says, habits are the most important thing in our lives. because we are creatures of habit, and therefore it's so crucial early on to form good habits because it gets harder when you get older. And whatever you're doing, whether it's a habit of exercise or goal setting or productivity, whatever it is, it's so important to get those down early on. And that's why this book, it really outlines how you can go into habit formation. Of course, I released a blog post on that book, and it kind of just boils down the key points to the book. So like you don't have to go through the fluff. But again, if you don't, you can either just go to my blog, willyoulaugh.com, and check that out, or just simply read the book. Now, next thing, beyond just habits, again, I'm going fast here, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Just pick one and go with it. And you might be like, oh my goodness, you've read so many books, I could never get there. Well, quite honestly, I'm a slow reader, and I barely read on a daily basis, but I read more than an average person. Like the average person reads 0. So if I just read like a couple pages, turn on an audiobook like for 20 minutes a day, I just get ahead. And that's, I think, really how a lot of people get ahead, whether it's exercising or anything else. So the next thing, so you've got your habits, you've got your wealth creation mindsets, and now you have your big key things, your regrets taken care of. Another book I would recommend, if you really want to get serious about money, is Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. Now, the problem with those other books I mentioned is that they can get vague, or it's just like tough to really tangibly make more money. You want like specific directions. You're like, okay, I have these mindsets, but I'm not progressing in any way. Another great book would be Laws of Success, and this man, I would trust him more than any other book on wealth because he spent his whole life studying the richest billionaires in the world, 500 of the wealthiest people in the world. His name is Napoleon Hill, and he got to rub shoulders in person with people like Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, Edison, so on and so forth. And I mean, a lifetime of that knowledge. I trust him more than anyone else. And the reason why I chose, he wrote a lot of books, but the reason why I chose that specific one was because that was really his magnum opus, which pretty much means like his life work poured into one book. His other books were kind of like one-off books based off certain principles of this huge book, Laws of Success. So really check that out if you really want some real laws of success. And by success, his main focus was making money, which isn't completely what I define as success, but nonetheless, it's an important part of success. Now, of course, success goes beyond just money. So what else can you do to succeed in life? Well, there's happiness. And there's so many theories and opinions and flawed beliefs about happiness. And I struggled with happiness for a long period of my life. And I finally turned to science. And I went through all these crappy books on supposed science of happiness and went through every TED Talk and video out there. And I would say the number one book that really is like the A to Z book on happiness, and with tons of scientific data to back it up, is one called The How of Happiness. And I really recommend it because it really just takes you a look behind the curtains. And it kind of just shows you, okay, this doesn't really help you with your happiness as much as you think. And one of the big things in the book that said that was money, any type of material possessions. And the reason is because we get used to them very quickly. It's called the hedonic treadmill. And there's all sorts of things that are more important. Gratitude, empathy, giving back to others, that actually have long enduring effects on your happiness. Not saying that money has no effect, but the effects rapidly diminish as you make just slightly more money, which is very interesting. And it's tough, even when you know that, and there's so much science to back it up, it's kind of tough to really accept that. But my whole view after reading that book was like, okay, I got to start focusing on these other things. Of course, I'll still make more money and try and make more money, but certain other things do take precedence. Now, if you really want to get into real nitty-gritty business books, there's so many I recommend, but out of all those I've read, I think the top 3 would be the first one would be Good to Great by Jim Collins. Just an incredible book. It was a very scientific analysis of some of the most profitable companies in the world and why they succeeded. Second book I recommend is Made in America by Sam Walton. This book, it's his life story, but he also gives a lot of directions and instructions. And there's a lot of timeless business principles in that book as he describes his life. This man made more money than anyone in history of the world through his company, Walmart. And the third book, in terms of making your business succeed, it's tough because there's so many books to choose from, but I would just put it as his Jay Abraham's book, The Sticking Point Solution. And that one's a little bit, I wouldn't say dry, but it's more advanced. But it's great for businesses that are struggling and really want to get going and get further. So those are the big three books I recommend. Of course, there's more, but come back to me once you've gone through those. And that's it for in a nutshell. Of course, there's all sorts of other books I'd be excited to tell you about, but I'll just cut it there because you're probably overwhelmed. And again, don't be overwhelmed. Just pick that one or two books, read a couple pages a day, and within a while, you will get ahead. If you want to start anywhere, I would say start with the habit book because that will help you keep consistent with your reading schedule. So thanks so much. And go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you're new to this podcast, because otherwise you're going to lose it and you won't know when I upload a new episode. If you do, you get free notifications when I upload new episodes, and then you won't forget what the name of this podcast and never be able to find it again. So thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.